Thank you everyone for joining in. We know some people will be trickling in as we begin the conversation. We are bound to have a very interesting time discussing about the role of free markets and its importance in Africa. We have two very great speakers that we are really excited about. We have Marian, editor of the humanprogress.org, and he's also a senior fellow at the Center for Global Liberty and Prosperity. So we are definitely excited to have you, also from the Cato Institute, and also Somachi, who is the Director of Partnerships and Communication for the Tony Elumelu Foundation, the foundation doing a lot in Africa for a lot of young people. So, but before we start, I mean, we had me having difficulty knowing which of the titles to, because I know Marian is also with the Cato Institute, so there are lots of feathers that they all have. I would like them to just say like a word or two first, just maybe take a minute to talk about, tell us something about yourself that you'd like to share. So I'll start with Somachi, then Marian will take over.
Thank you so much, Joshua. As you rightly said, I'm the Director of Partnerships and Communications at the Tony Elumelu Foundation. The foundation is the largest philanthropy empowering young African entrepreneurs in Africa. We're very excited about entrepreneurs. We have been doing this for 10 years now, and we look forward to sharing our insights on this space, on this call. So we're very excited to be here.
Thank you. Marian, please, can you?
Yes, my name is Marian Tupy. I'm a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank in Washington, D.C. We are committed to ideas of limited government, free markets, and peace. I Cato in 2002 to work on issues and also on transition in Eastern Europe from communism to capitalism. And then later I started an autonomous project called Human Progress to track improvements in human development indicators across the world. And I also run a Simon project, which looks at the affordability of natural resources.
Thank you so much. What a better introduction. So moving on quickly, because we have a lot of things to discuss and we know that we will also have lots of questions. I'd like to just, for the sake of those who are joining in, first of all, to notify you that this is an Adam Smith event, and we are really focused on encouraging the conversation around capitalism, about the benefits, about the moral issues, and we just love the conversation, and we're glad to have you joining us. And for those of you who are yet to be members of this great society, please feel free to join. It's a great place to be part of. And in the course of the conversation, Susanna will put in a link where if you're not yet a registered member, you can just click and join. It's just $10 for the year. And moving on from that, we'd like you to know that this event is recorded. So just FYI. And we'll move straight to the meat of our discussion for today. And I'd like to start with Somachi. I really want her to share with us more like a top line, I'll say, evaluation of the current state of capitalism on the continent of Africa. So I'd like her to just talk about, from her perspective, the existing policies from the government, how government perception have been regarding capitalism, how the public has viewed it, and just give us an overall view of capitalism in Africa.
Thanks so much, Joshua. I think that, first of all, we're very excited to be part of this session. Our founder, Mr. Elumelu, coined the philosophy he calls Afri-capitalism, and is really saying that we can no longer outsource the role of development on the African continent to government. And so it's a call for more private sector players to get involved, because we cannot speak economic growth, development, inclusiveness without the private sector playing the leading role. And so that's what Afri-capitalism is all about. And we want to see more private sector investors, more private sector actors on the African continent. So we're very excited about capitalism, but we do understand that capitalism, as we've always known it, has to be contextualized for the African context and the African environment. We cannot just, copy and paste capitalism as we've known it for hundreds of years in the African context. And so that's why we've coined what we call Afro-capitalism, for a new type of capitalism on the African continent. Joshua, to your question, I think nothing demonstrates the new generation of African entrepreneurs and African capitalism as much as the COVID-19 pandemic, which we're still literally living through on the continent. One of the first responders to the pandemic on the continent was actually our founder, Mr. Elumelu. He gave a massive donation of $14 million across 20 African governments to kickstart the Pan-African response to the pandemic. So before now, we would have thought that government alone will champion and lead the way in COVID-19 recovery, but on the African continent, it was different. African private sector players, African businessmen and women came together to start the COVID-19 recovery across the continent. When we're also discussing vaccine and vaccinations and bringing those in, African private sector has played the leading role as well in having conversations with the vaccine manufacturers, in trying to negotiate deals and trying to bring them in and looking and sourcing for the storage units, the logistics, the facilities. The African private sector has played the leading role. When it was in the middle of the pandemic and we had to look at hospitals and infrastructure where people could come in to isolate, to receive healthcare, again, not African governments, but African private sector played the leading role. So I think that capitalism has come of age in Africa. African businessmen and women continue to innovate every day. SMEs in Africa employ over 90% of labor. So more likely than not, if you're an African, you're employed by a corporate or an SME. Government jobs are on the decline. SMEs, again, contribute 60% of the African GDP. So you see that capitalism in Africa is here to stay. And no longer are we discussing bloated public service or bloated government administrations. Now we see the rise of the SMEs, the rise of capitalism, the rise of African corporates across the continent. So in terms of what you said about policies and how Africans view capitalism on the continent, I think that governments are beginning to also wake up and see that they need, in order to have a company that is existing, you need to create policies and laws that support and enable private enterprise. I don't think it's a matter of choice anymore. I think African governments are forced to recognize the power of enterprise, the power of business, and that it's in their best interest to ensure that enabling environments are created across the continent. For example, you see that income from resources across the continent is on the decline. And so more governments are looking for internal revenue generation. So they're looking for more income from taxes. And you can't tax an economy that doesn't have businesses, that doesn't have corporate. And so African governments are waking up to the reality that in order to do well for themselves, to do well for businesses. And it's a good thing now because I think what they wanted to be when they grew up. A governor or someone in public service. But I think now you ask and they tell you, I want to be an Aliko Dangote, I want to be Tony Elumelu. They want to be capitalists, they want to be businessmen and women. And I think that that's a good thing for the continent at large.
Yeah, thank you for that detailed response. It will be really interesting as we discuss further to see how all this tie into the public perception and how the public continues to receive the ideas of capitalism. But just moving on, I would like to direct my next question to Marian. And I would like him to really go deeper now in terms of really dissecting the Anglophone Africa in terms of its performance overall from your examination. How do you think that's performed? And really talking about the levers that you think may have been more significant, that have played a role in driving the free market or in not driving the free market?
Thank you very much. Delighted to be with you. I think my comment apply to Anglophone as well as Francophone Africa in the general sense. The situation with capitalism in Africa is not good, but it is improving. So first, the bad news. My comments are based on data from the Economic Freedom of the World report, which is published by the Fraser Institute in Canada. I recommend all the students, all the viewers and listeners to check it out. It's called the Economic Freedom of the World report. The World Report started in 1970s, so now we have about 50 years of data, and it measures capitalism, it measures economic freedom along 5 distinct domains. First is the size of government, second is freedom to trade, third is soundness of money, meaning whether you have inflation or not, fourth is domestic regulation, and I'm missing the fifth, but we can return to it a bit later. The best performing African country is Mauritius in 7th place out of 162 countries. The next best performing African country is Botswana in 43rd place. Most African countries are at the very bottom of the list. Now, so that's the bad news. Here is the good news. As late as the 1990s, when I was a student at an African university, it was considered to be a perfectly normal subject of conversation that A, Africans should not participate in international trade because it was exploitative. B, Africans should not own multinational corporations in Africa because they were exploitative. And C, that Africa should eschew or not welcome foreign direct investment because that was exploitative. We saw a sea change in African openness, engagement with the global capitalist structures. I would call it globalization. Africa saw what happens to countries when they embrace globalization. Africans have learned from India, from China, from South Korea, from Taiwan, and countless other places that if you open yourself to international trade, you can benefit from it. So in that sense, we saw a sea change. The problem is that in order to participate in globalization, you need to sell. This is very important. You have to have something to sell. And that brings me to the second level of capital, not just globalization, but domestic capitalism, the competitive enterprise at the local, national level. And here, we are not seeing as much progress as I would like to see. Africans are still suffering from far too many rules. They are still suffering from overregulation. They are still suffering from complicated rules for firing and hiring and that sort of thing. So in other words, even though there was a change, and Africa, we obviously saw the African free trade zone, but also, Africa is more open to trade with the rest of the world. It is still using enough to earn enough capital. It's not producing enough to become rich, because the productive capacity of Africans are being restricted by overbearing bureaucracies and, of course, very importantly, the very substandard rule of law and the persistence of corruption. Now, corruption is not a only African problem. Corruption is not having a corrupt society is the exception. Whether you look Europe, Southeast Europe, the further south and the further east you get, countries become more corrupt. Latin America has huge problems with corruption. Same goes for Asia. But it is the tackling of corruption and building of the rule of law, which is absolutely crucial to ordinary Africans being able to be productive individuals without the worry of confiscation, without waiting too much for a resolution of disputes and things like that. We can talk about values, about what Africa can do about corruption, but I would say this is my overall picture of capitalism in Africa at the moment.
Yes, thank you for that excellent analysis. I actually think that, there's a lot to discuss in that area. I'll just share a few points of from my own perspective. I definitely feel that there's an opportunity to build institutions, and we've had politicians, scholars across the world talk about the importance of institutions as a driver for the free market in Africa, strong independent institutions. And I think that, as a matter of fact, even thinking about institutions, you look at the evolution of arguably you see that the Francophone part of Africa has lagged in terms of development compared to the Anglophone part. And some people will trace it to the influence of France on some of the policies of these countries. So in a way, this is still is like the vicious circle, the circle of concern of undue external influence. And this concern of undue external influence is affecting the perception. And that was why I started by asking so much about the perception, because the perception drives policy. Politicians want to make the people happy, and if the people have some negative perceptions, looking at what they feel is too much of influence on the political systems or the monetary policies of Francophone countries and how they are fed, it raises a lot of controversial areas or some more questions, I'll say, than answers. But we'll be moving on from there to really, I'm happy you started with the bad news, so I want Somachi to talk about a bit of the bad and the good news now, specific to now Nigeria. So I like the fact that you mentioned Mauritius, you mentioned Botswana. I love the fact that we are talking about specific Africa countries. We started off from the top level talking about Africa, but Africa is made up of 54 countries, much more complicated, diverse people and all that. So now thinking about Nigeria, Somachi, as the largest economy in Africa, the challenge I was also highlighting is about the trickling of the wealth and the prosperity to the average Nigerian. And I know this because I'm a Nigerian, that Nigerians are not necessarily satisfied with equity and around all that. So my question is, looking at this situation, how really can the free market help to expand these opportunities? You kind of talked a little bit about the Tony Elumelu Foundation and what it's currently doing. It's a great opportunity for you to share more, because we're seeing some unicorns, billion-dollar startups coming out of Nigeria, which is exactly what the Tony Elumelu Foundation has been trying to do and is funding. So how do you think all these will help to create confidence in Nigeria, especially among the average Nigerian, to embrace the free market?
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. I just want to say that it's also important that we have a realistic picture of what's happening on the continent, right? And the reality is that, and I heard Marian speak, but I just want to correct a few things. The reality is that capitalism is flourishing on the continent. So regardless of what was happening in 1999 or what the popular media is reporting, capitalism is doing very well. I think there are countless reports and studies that show that Africa has some of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world. Whether that's born out of need or want or desire, that's not a question. But we do have very entrepreneurial communities. The average African young man or woman is trying to start a business, is trying to employ others in the community, is trying to generate an independent income. And what is holding capitalism or enterprise or free markets back is not bureaucracy, is not rule of law, but actually infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of transportation, logistics, internet, facilities. That's what's holding the average African young man or woman back, and not rule of law or dispute resolution or bureaucracy. Those are secondary issues, in all honesty. the reality is that it's infrastructure. And so I just really I don't want the students on the call to go away with the wrong image of the continent. And I would just really like to clarify some things. The average African, and you want me to go to Nigeria, let's go to Nigeria. So at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, where Africa is the largest philanthropy, and the work that we do centers around empowering entrepreneurs. So this is what we do every single day. Capitalism and business and enterprise is literally our bread and butter. This is what we do. We work across all 54 African countries, and we've empowered over 10,000 entrepreneurs so far. And when I say empower, it means identifying, funding, training, mentoring them, and giving them access to key markets and key networks. So everything entrepreneurship on the continent, we're there with the biggest players in the space. In Nigeria, the perception is that don't wait for government to give you a job, or don't wait to be employed by a multinational. Instead, start a job yourself. Instead, do something, run a business, employ others while employing yourself. That's the average mentality. The issue, though, is that to survive and to run a business in Nigeria is pretty hard. There is no electricity, the roads are bad, there's a poor logistic network, etc., but that entrepreneurial spirit is still there. And the laws guiding you and the policies in place are actually supported. In so many African countries, Nigeria included, we have banks, development banks that have been set up only targeting entrepreneurs and giving them loans and grants and funding, etc. So in terms of what's holding young African entrepreneurs back, it's not a lack of government support, it's not stifling policies, it is not government regulation, it is not rule of law, it is actually infrastructure. And as soon as we solve that infrastructure deficit, as soon as we invest in power, we invest in the right infrastructure, we're going to see an explosion of capitalism across the continent. And this goes not just in Nigeria, but across all 54 African countries. And I can tell you this because we are in all of these countries, we have real life entrepreneurs who communicate with us every day, and we know their problems. So it's important that everyone who's listening in knows the real issues and knows what exists actually on ground on the continent. You know, I hear you talk about politicians and politicians wanting people to feel a certain way. I think that the African individual has, is more discerning, is more skeptical, is less gullible. And I don't know that politicians are able to get away with the feel-good perception or selling something that's not real. I think that more African countries are beginning to hold elected officials accountable. They're beginning to demand for accountability in office. They're beginning to demand for free and fair elections, and we're seeing more of that. And we're beginning to see more diversity and more inclusion in politics. So we now have more young people running for office. We have more young people and more women in power. We have more dynamism in government and in the citizenship. So I think you want me to say the bad news, but honestly, I think there's a lot of good news from where we sit. And I think that as long as we do identify the issues correctly and properly channel resources to develop and solve those issues, and I think we'll continue to be on the right track. So yes, infrastructure, power, transport, connectivity, accessibility, road networks, logistics, warehousing, these are infrastructure constraints holding back the African enterprise. But once we unlock those bottlenecks, I think there'll be a massive explosion to come.
Okay, thank you, Somachi. I'll just add to that I know you are more optimistic than I am. I'm a pessimist optimist. So I still agree with you, but I still feel that there's definitely the role of building those institutions, because if, for example, you have issues and you cannot trust the legal system to seek redress, it begins to question some of the investments you can take. It questions your confidence in the system. So that's, for me, the other side. So building those institutions can also, as you build infrastructure, you also build institutions that are independent, where you can easily take the government to court if you feel you want to seek redress without fear of intimidation. I still will say, for example, in Nigeria, while there's still an improvement, but there's still quite a number of government officials moving with impunity. So even if this may occur, this is a fact, so there's an opportunity to sort of seek that balance. But definitely, the area that your foundation has focused on is you're not going to change the government, you can change the people, you can change the mindset, you can invest in the energies, and which you are doing and has gotten some great results. I'll just move to Marian and
Sorry, Joshua. Sorry, I just wanted to add something to what you said. As I said, we belong to what we call Air Holdings Group, and we have investment in over 10 sectors of the African economy. One of that being oil and gas, right, which is Nigeria's bread and butter. But we're able to raise over $1.5 billion from the global investment community to invest in this oil asset alongside us. And if the investor confidence was so low in Nigeria, that wouldn't have been possible. If there was absolute distrust in the government's legal system and taking government to court, that would not be possible. I think that these are issues that are historical. These are issues that have pervaded the African continent for so long that we then, our first instinct is to believe that those issues are still existing. The reality is that we have many partners who have taken government to court and have succeeded. We have actual instances of smaller corporations taking the government to court and coming out victorious. Is it as often as we would like? Maybe not. But is it happening? Yes. Would it have happened 10 years ago? Absolutely not. So, so we just believe, that it's important to tell a full, true, accurate picture of the reality, and not to resort to things that have happened in the past, things that are gradually being erased. So I agree with you. I like that you already said you're a pessimist. No, you're a pessimistic optimist.
Yeah. That's right.
which I love, which is brilliant. But I just really want us to understand how much progress has been made and how a lot of these historic issues are being erased. Thanks.
Yes, Maria, comment. So let me have you comment on that before we proceed.
Thank you. So Somachi and I have a bit of a disagreement, not a full disagreement, but a bit of a disagreement, which creates for a good debate and learn. I, of course, fully acknowledge that African entrepreneurs that Africa is filled with young people who are go-getters. There is a professor from American University, he calls it the cheetah generation, the fast-running people who are engaging in trade, who are engaging in innovation. Trade have been very good since the start of the new millennium. African population is growing. There are a lot of countries which are sort of approaching the lower middle income stratum, which means that they are now providing huge markets for foreign corporations for getting goods and that sort of thing. So, I don't want to come across as saying that I do not see a lot of good stuff happening on the. What I'm saying is that if you can move African countries from the very bottom of the Economic Freedom of the World Report to the top of the Economic Freedom of the World Report, then Africa is going to see much better results, even higher economic growth rate. You can get out of poverty at a much quicker pace. If you are growing at 7% a year, you're going to double your GDP per capita in a decade. I do not, and this is where disagreement comes in, a polite disagreement, but disagreement nonetheless. I do not buy that infrastructure is crucial to economic growth. In my view, and this is based on a lot of the reasons that I've done, great infrastructure or even good infrastructure is a result of economic growth, not a prerequisite for economic growth. Take the United States of America, for example. The United States of America started building an interstate highway in 1955. The United States became the richest country in 1990. In other words, 60 years after the United States was the richest country in the world, we started to build an interstate highway because infrastructure, as I said, is an outcome of development, not a prerequisite for development. I also understand the point being made about electricity and access to electricity and things like that. But why don't we have multinational companies over each other trying to build new coal-powered or nuclear power station in Africa? Part of the problem, I think, is that to do that, they need to make investments that need to be secure, and the repayment needs to be secure for many decades to come. If there isn't a trust in the government to be able to maintain political and economic stability for 40, 50, 60 years ahead of time, stay away with the sort of investment that I think you need. Structure.
Okay. Thank you, Marian, for your perspective, and we'll definitely be moving ahead. And I mean, this is the Adam Smith Society. We love debates. So I'm having a good time, and I'm sure other people are learning from the different perspectives and angles we're both viewing the topic from. So, Marian, I'm coming back to you now, and I'd like you to, you mentioned, I think, Botswana, and was it Botswana and one other country, Mauritius, if I'm correct. And you talked about the ranking. You felt like they're definitely doing something right. So I'd like you to tell us more about those policies you think has been instrumental in that ranking or in the outputs that those countries are experiencing.
Yeah, there are three countries which are really outperform the rest of Africa in economic freedom of the World Report. Botswana, Cape Verde, a small island of Mozambique, and then Mauritius. I'm going to focus on Botswana because it is an integral part of Africa, and both culturally, ethnically, and so forth. Botswana is a truly astonishing success story. Between 1966 and 2019, Botswana becomes independent in 1966, and 2019 grew 5 times as fast as the global average. 5 times faster than the global average. Between 1975 and 2005, Botswana was growing faster than China. So that shows you what a country with good institutions can do in order to benefit its own people. Botswana was one of the poorest countries in the world when it became independent in 1966. Today, it's a country. It overtook South Africa ago in terms of GDP per capita. And in many other indicators, it is doing extremely well. So in my view, if I were an African, well, I am an African in a way. I have a South African passport. But if I wanted to talk about Afro-capitalism, I would want to research a lot about what Botswana has done right, and whether those lessons can be applied to other countries as well. That would, in my view, Botswana is a perfect example of capitalism with African character, and it works. So clearly, Africa is fully capable of achieving great things. What are the lessons from Botswana? What can we learn from it? Let's do some research on it, and let's see if those lessons can be applied elsewhere.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So, Somachi, I'd like you to come back to Nigeria again. You kind of started talking about what entrepreneurs are doing, and I'm particularly interested in people like Aliko Dangote, the richest man in Africa, and some of the things he's doing, especially his current project, building the largest single refinery in the world. So this is a massive project. I know he had to, the infrastructural requirement was just out of this world. So I'd like you to share how, just looking at, for example, Nigeria government has been involved in the refining of petroleum. We have different refineries that have not worked for a long time. They're always budgeting money to repair the refineries, turnaround maintenance, but it seems nothing holistic has come out to stop Nigeria from importing refined products. So just thinking about it and how it has impacted, even because when Marian was talking, he talked about like depreciation. So when you are buying so much, you're definitely looking for more dollars, you're weakening your currency, and this has a negative, like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy of declining the economy. So looking at those kind of major infrastructural projects versus what the government has done, I would like you to just tell me like what you think is your take on it, and looking at the future, how you think that not just Nigeria, but other Africa countries will sort of shift towards the mega entrepreneurs believing or trusting or put responsibility in them, saying that major government projects that have lasted for many years have not been able to deliver.
I hear you, and I heard Marian discuss Botswana, which is interesting because we have some of our best entrepreneurs from Botswana, and I think Botswana is a perfect example of why infrastructure is necessary for economic development and growth. I think if we were discussing idyllic case studies, that's actually our perfect case study. On Nigeria, and more particularly, I think that the reason why we haven't seen the type of growth and development and investment that a country like Nigeria ordinarily should have is because, one, the infrastructure is missing, and two, there's some markets that have been known to be captive government markets. So markets that government is playing such a huge role in that will not allow private sector investments. And one of such sectors is power. In Nigeria, as you know, government, TCN, that's the Transmission Corporation of Nigeria, is the only transmitter of electricity. And so if you're a player in the power sector in Nigeria, to generate power, you're not able to determine how you transfer and transmit and distribute that power. Government has the whole transmission space on lockdown. And so that also deters investment, because you don't want to invest in a sector where the value chain is unpredictable, or you don't have total control, or you cannot predict how it plays out. So the reason why our refineries, for example, have not worked in over 30 years is because, again, we're not doing the scheduled maintenances that are needed. We don't have the infrastructure to keep them running at optimal capacity, and we have not allowed private investment in that sector. Now we have Aliko Dangote, who is coming in and building this large facility. But he was not able to do that without massive government support. The government gave him the land, gave him some of the resources, and gave him a lot of permission to build the refinery he's building. And so you see a space that is now gradually being unlocked because government has reduced its involvement in that sector. We have another billionaire in Nigeria, Abdusalat, I don't know if you know Boa, Abdusalmat Rabiu, who is building his own refinery now in Akwa Ibom. So you see that by government just coming back a little and withdrawing from this sector a little, we see massive private investment coming in. I can tell you that by next year, we'll have at least 5 more private refineries coming in. So it's clear what the investment that government is able to drive in just by creating the enabling environment, just by guaranteeing some infrastructure, just by giving some support, and just by withdrawing a little to allow private investment flooding. And hopefully, with government, creating the right enabling environment, we'll continue to see even more investments come into that space and other sectors on the continent. What Aliko is doing will certainly help to reduce Nigeria's dependency on refined oil imports from abroad, because as we said, it doesn't do anything for our currency. It further weakens the currency, and it creates a very negative cycle, because as the Nigerian currency is weakened, then we have to spend even more to continue to import. So I think that, with more such investments, the future of the continent looks a little more resilient, a little more dependent, and we're excited for what's to come.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. I certainly agree with a quote I read somewhere. It says the only business government have with business is getting out of business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely a proponent of the free market, and I just don't know why all these things have not happened much earlier, because I feel it's really impeding more investment. Whatever growth we have seen, we could have seen it in the 3x, the 4x, and the 5x if we had the government had proactively opened up the sector. One of my favorite projects that I always feel bad about, but I like to talk about, is the Ajaokuta steel mill that the government has invested in for so many years. Probably it has been there for almost 40 years or so, and it has not been able to produce any steel bar, as a classic case study of just the government not having any business in
Yeah,
business.
it's a white elephant project, certainly.
Yeah. So I want to move to now, I've really looked at specific countries, now looking at it from a broader point of view. And I want to go back to Marian to really talk about, he hinted it earlier about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So we see many countries, even the United States, had almost started going into, closing up itself from the world. And we see Brexit is a reflection of a new mindset where countries are trying to look out for their interests, in quotes, and just pull out of, collaborations, globalization, you may call it. So I'd like you to talk more about this so-called Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and what you think are the implications, positive, negative, on the future of the African economy.
So I would like to separate the United States and let me start with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is actually reducing its tariffs. The goal, the way that the Conservative Party was talking about it, is to be the rest of the world. The European Union has a lot of trade happening internally. Something like 66% of all things and services which are made in Europe are sold within Europe. But Europe has a boundary around it, like a protective shield, so that people have to pay a tariff to get in. One of the reasons why United Kingdom wanted to get out of Europe is European Union. It cannot get out of Europe, but it wanted to get out of the European Union in order to lower the tariffs. What Trump has succeeded in doing here in the United States was convince a lot more people to embrace free trade. In other words, his crass anti-free trade agenda has upset a lot of people, and there is a much greater support for free trade than there was before. That doesn't include China. China is an exception here. It's a geopolitical competitor. China things which Americans don't like, both domestically and also in international economy. And therefore, I think that the friction and the restrictions on Chinese trade with the United States are there to continue. But that doesn't mean that the United States is going to become a hyper-protectionist in the future. So with that being said, what is happening in Africa is, in my view, obviously a good thing. Last time I checked, of all the goods and services produced in Africa, only 10% were traded within the African continent. There is obviously a room to grow. Under the African Free Trade Agreement, 90% of all goods will be tariff-free. That's a good thing. But that's not what's going to prosper us, for the following reason. Free trade is part of what economists refer to as Smithian growth, named after Adam Smith. Adam Smith lived before technology became really. Smithian growth refers to adding more people, more capital, and more land to the productive process. So, let's say Botswana will specialize in one thing, Zimbabwe in another thing, Nigeria in one thing, Niger in other thing, and you will generate a lot of efficiency, which will then increase the living of African people. But the power of Smithian growth to enrich people is tiny compared to the power of Schumpeterian growth, named after Joseph Schumpeter, the economist. Schumpeterian growth is not based on adding more people, more land, and more capital to the production process. Schumpeterian growth is based on innovation. Instead of farmers to work on the land, as Adam Smith would have it, you come up with a tractor. That's the difference between Smithian growth and Schumpeterian growth. Moving forward, the way that Africa can really jump and transcend that Smithian growth. It needs to become more innovative. One way to become more innovative, shut up, I've been talking long enough. One way to become more innovative is that you really have to open your economies to the import of foreign technology and foreign information. Information there's a lot of implicit information which comes within individual corporations. Corporations develop their own there's a lot of implicit knowledge that you will be able to import if you allow foreign corporations to work in your countries, to hire your people, to interact with and pass that implicit knowledge onto the local workforce and that sort of thing. And of course, there's a lot of implicit which comes in with regard to technology. So by importing foreign technology, you are then able to really engage in growth, and it is through innovation that Africa can leapfrog this Smith and really generate very high rates of growth.
I completely agree with you, and I like the Schumpeterian growth. I've not heard about it before. I know the concept, so thank you for sharing that. And I definitely feel that it's already happening in terms of some of the innovation I talked about, where young Africans are innovating companies that are, at least 2 or 3 companies now, young Nigerians have innovated, and they're now valued at about $1 billion. So this definitely shows the importance of what you're talking about the impact of technology, about innovation in kind of leapfrogging the progress of Africa and, by extension, the entire market. So I definitely am enjoying this conversation, but I don't want some of our listeners, I'm sure they have been worried to ask some questions, and I don't want to take all the fun today because I'm having fun. This is an amazing time. So I'd like anybody who have any question, you can just quickly chat it or raise your hand if you want to ask the question, and we'll have you ask your question. If you want to ask any of the speakers, the floor is open for now. Okay, so it seems we have a listening audience. They're soaking in the rest. Then I will definitely move to my final question, and I would like both of you to respond to this question. And this really has to do with I would like you both to examine the efficacy of foreign aid. You know, most foreigners, I'll say most Americans, like in their perception of, say, Nigeria or Africa, more often than not, think more about a charity environment. Like, you know, I see pictures, I see things. I'm currently in the United States, and you see some things, and just that mindset that Africa is, you know, for charity and all that, versus really thinking about Africa as a high growth market that can become a really major hub for investment. So I would like both of you to just tell me what your take is on this, seeing that I know both of you have worked in different parts of the world, interacted with different nationalities. What do you think is the mindset on this foreign aid? What's your perspective, and what's your recommendation moving forward? Any one of you can go first.
I spoke last, so I think it's Somachi's turn.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. I think that, you know, at the foundation, we're firm believers in not believing in foreign aid. And we will tell you that aid has a role, and it's played a wonderful role. It has saved lots of lives, especially in emergency response. But for sustainability, for long term, for the future, we cannot have a future of foreign aid. What we call for is more private investment, more enterprise, more free markets, more innovation from Africa. I don't believe that we need to wait for foreign technology to come to us to grow. What we've seen actually from our experience is lots of genuine local innovation and local technology and local creativity that's doing amazing things. Now, many times we look to Kenya and we see what M-Pesa is doing, and we see what our African banks are doing in innovating and really redefining what the barriers to finance is. So I don't subscribe that we have to wait for foreign trade or for foreign technology or foreign aid. I think that Africans have the tools, the capacity, the resilience, the knowledge, the networks to grow on our own. All we need is more investment in infrastructure, more support for African SMEs, and less government involvement. Government needs to go away and let the private sector reign supreme. Again, we subscribe to what we call Capitalism, which is the role of development is not the role of government. Private sector, SMEs, entrepreneurs will drive Africa's development if they are resourced and giving the support to do so. To keep it succinct, Joshua, I'm done. That's my last word.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll go to Marian for his response or his own perspective.
I second wholeheartedly what Somachi has said. Foreign aid has not brought out a single country in the history of the world from poverty into prosperity. It can make a difference in individual lives. It can build a hospital here or a road, but ultimately, what makes people rich is human freedom. It is the ability of an ordinary African to do with his life what he pleases, to apply his or her knowledge and his or her efforts, and keep the profits of those efforts for their families. So we are in complete agreement on that.
Fantastic. This was a great session, and I really want to thank you, Somachi, Marian, for making it. Special thanks to Susanna from Manhattan Institute for really helping to make this event a success. And we thank all our participants. We know that, it's recorded, so a lot of people are going to still have to watch it, because this was an amazing session. Thank you all so much, and wish you all the best. Thank you.